that people could really access the president and could pay critiques, because Gus Dur has been smartly and playfully play his card. Suharto government, for the whole of the New Order government, they are afraid of Nahdlatul Ulama.
Yeah, thank you, Mas Syafi'i, because those who are attending in this discussion are also some students coming from foreign countries. I think we need some kind of little bit explanation to them. If we are talking about Indonesian Islam, usually in the context of Indonesia, we have two major and big organization here, which is firstly called Nahdlatul Ulama. This is I call as the largest Muslim organization in Indonesia, with a lot of numbers. Some people say around 70 million people, but some people say around 50. And the second largest is Muhammadiyah. This is reformist and modernist Muslim in Indonesia. And usually Indonesian people affiliate with this organization, because in neighboring country like Malaysia, they don't have civil Islamic organization like what happened in the context of in the context of Indonesia. And Pak Syafi'i said about the three most important figures within the Muslim scholars of Indonesia. And Pak Philip, around 15 minutes also.
Thank you, Pak Syafiq. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, first of all, for Syafiq and friends for inviting me to share my contribution in this newly published book. When the two editors contacted me to contribute in the plan for the book, Mas Gaus was the first who contacted me, and then asking me to contribute chapters of what I am thinking about the three leaders. Initially, I was reluctant, Pak Rektor, because I do not have background in the Islamic studies. I follow the three great leaders, intellectual leaders, from afar. So I said to Pak Gaus, okay, let me think a little bit before I said yes, because that's going to be a huge responsibility to write about these three great leaders. But then the day after, Pak Rektor messaged me asking me to contribute. Of course, Pak Rektor is my boss. I could not say no. So I said, yes, Pak Rektor. And then I was thinking what I should write. Now, then I decided to write a piece that I think at that time would be different from other writings in the book, because the three leaders and their impacts and contribution have been felt in terms of thinking, philosophical thinking, their interpretation about Islam, and how we in Indonesia should implement and practice Islam in the context of a nation that is plural, and then there is developing countries. So the three of them share these traits of thought leaders. They are great thinkers, Muslim intellectual leaders. But then I was thinking, given my background, I am political scientist by training, what can I write about these three figures, but looking at them through the perspective and lenses of political science? Because I would not be able to compete with Pak Syafi'i Ma'arif, who I believe has been very, Pak Syafi'i Anwar, who I believe would write very eloquently about Cak Nur, Nurholis Majid, and Gus Dur, Abdurrahman Wahid, and Syafi'i Ma'arif. So then I was asking Pak Gaus, can I write about just one of them? And he said, maybe, because I already said yes, and Pak Rector already tasked me to write, and he said yes. Because my argument was, among these three leaders, they are all civil society activists. They are all cultural leaders of Indonesia. They are all thought leaders, as I said earlier. But only one of them has been in position of policymakers. And even in the top of the pyramid of power in Indonesia, being a president. And Gus Dur, as this policymaker and political leaders with the power to issue policies, I think has been understudied. Because being a thought leader, civil society leaders, of course, we all experience, we are not faced by the complexities of policies that you need to be really very, very inclusive as a policymakers. And maybe you're not dealing with the parliament, you're not dealing with political parties, and so you're not dealing with the nature of power relations if you are civil society leaders or thought leaders. But as a president, then I think we can see the true quality of the leader if they are in the position of making policies. And I think Gus Dur provide a very good example of how civil society leaders then transform into a formal political leaders. So then I decided to write about Gus Dur on that particular aspect that I think has been understudied. And hopefully after this, we're gonna scrutinize how there are some articles about this, but I think if we provide another context of this Gus Dur and others in the context of transition to democracy after Suharto fall in 1998, then that period of 1998 to 2001, so about 3 years, was very critical period for Indonesian democracy up until today. And this 3 years period has, in my opinion, also has been understudied. And there are a lot of things that emerged during that period. Number one, and as it is reflected in many articles in this book, I think they reflect two things about Indonesia. Number one, since day one of the Republic, August 17, 1945, our main issue, main problem, main social political problem that has continued until today with different dynamics is the relationship between state and religion. At the constitutional level, it's been settled that our constitution said Indonesia is a country that is not based on one religion, right? And we accepted, our founding fathers and mothers accepted this, the society accepted this, but it's kind of oscillating every period depending on the economic situation, geopolitics, global situation, domestic politics, and so on. There has always been problem with the issue of state and religion relationship. And Gus Dur is at the heart of this debate, I think, for the whole of his life. Since 1970s, as and Abdurrahman Wahid, Nurholis Majid as well, they have been on the side that favor Indonesia as a plural society, but at the same time, they were operating under the authoritarian government of the New Order since 1970s up until 1998. So, I think what Gus Dur did as a president is a reflection and continuation of what he had been before as the leader. And what was his relationship that affected the way he looked at policies and Indonesia's transition to democracy in his short period as a president in 1999 after the Indonesian election, right? Number one, Gus Dur faced a very delicate situation in every literature on transition to democracy, that short period of time is called an interim period. And also, I think it provides a lot of literature. We tend to study democratization as a long process, but there are critical moments of democratization everywhere. The very first year is considered very important. And Gus Dur was at the heart of this very critical moment. And I think we were lucky to have Gus Dur in that very critical period. But he had to face power struggles between those who support the outgoing authoritarian regime and the upcoming democratic regime or society, if you will, right? And as a result, because Gus Dur became the president, not through direct presidential election like what we had today, he was depending on the coalition of Islamic parties. And this is also very interesting, given Gus Dur tend to be try to distance himself from Islamic political parties. But during that critical moment, he was aligning and he was supported by the Islamic parties to become the president. Not through, because we at that time did not have direct presidential election. So he relied on the support of this coalition within the parliament to become the president. So he owed some legitimacy from this Islamic parties coalition. So during his presidency, he had to play this very, very carefully because his narrative about him being a pluralist leader, but at the same time, he was supported by the Islamic parties. Number two, he faced very serious problem inherited as naturally from transition to democracy period. That was the threat of disintegration. Right. At that time, we just had a referendum in 1999 in East Timor, and the previous interim president before Gus Dur was President Habibie. Right? And Habibie's accountability speech in the Indonesian parliament was rejected, partly because the Indonesian parliament thought Habibie made wrong decision about East Timor. And at that time, there was a real fear of Indonesia disintegrating. So Habibie's accountability speech was rejected, and Gus Dur inherited this fear of Indonesia's disintegration. We had problem in Aceh, and then in 98, 99, we had serious conflict, bloody conflict in Maluku, where Muslim and Christians, they killed each other, and so on. There was traumatic period in Indonesia as well. And then there were many aspirations. Some other provinces, there were talks about Riau, who wanted to separate from Indonesia and so on and so on. So this second problem faced by Gus Dur, the threat of disintegration. Number three, the problem that he faced, even more difficult, that is how to bring back the economic stability in Indonesia. For those of you who are coming from overseas, maybe if I may provide you some context of Indonesia's democratization, it started off with financial crisis in 1997. So the New Order government, the authoritarian government, based their legitimacy of successfully develop Indonesia economically. And suddenly we had economic crisis in 1997. This legitimacy collapsed and evaporated. That's why the basis of New Order kind of collapsed, because people felt, well, you don't have that kind of legitimacy anymore. We probably accepted authoritarianism, trading with economic prosperity. Now, we are still authoritarian and we become poor because of the economic crisis. So it evaporated, but Gus Dur inherited this economic problem, how to revive the Indonesian economy. And that's not an easy job to do. Number four, the problem that he was facing exactly on the reforming Indonesian military. That was the backbone of the authoritarian government of the New Order. So how he did this, and this is the point of my article, is that he's not looking at the domestic support and domestic legitimacy. Instead, he went overseas. Right? At that time, he was critiqued Because why would a president, during a very difficult period, instead went overseas, visiting so many countries in the very short period of time? Gus Dur went to all ASEAN capitals. He visited Washington D.C. to meet with Michael Kamdesu, the chairman of IMF. Indonesians would remember the big picture of Michael Kamdesu observing Suharto signing the memorandum with IMF. That IMF was supporting Indonesia with certain requirements that would also even, attack the basis of Suharto's legitimacy. The image, if you Google it up, you would see how that image, and then that partly, I think, responsible for the way people see Suharto as now becoming weaker and weaker in front of the international audience, that is IMF. So Gus Dur met Michael Kamdesu in Washington D.C. and so on, because he was, and then he met also with Bill Clinton. The image of Gus Dur laughing with Clinton, very hard. Clinton was, I think, enjoyed his conversation with Gus Dur and other visits that he made. Even he, at that time, creating controversy in Indonesia because he was saying he's going to fire Pak Wiranto, right? At that time, the Minister of Defense from overseas. That was, he was, if Pak Syafi'i earlier said that Gus Dur, Nurholis Majid, and Syafi'i Ma'arif are deformalizing Islamic interpretation in Indonesia, Gus Dur was deformalizing power in Indonesia, right? And that, I think, is one of the greatest contribution, because now people see power not from the perspective of something untouchable and unreachable. And Gus Dur, with his NU background and so on, very relaxed and so on, make power looks very accessible, that people could really access the president and could pay critiques, because Gus Dur has been smartly and playfully play his card. Suharto government, for the whole of the New Order government, they are afraid of Nadatul Ulama, I think, because this is the group that could challenge the power of the New Order government, right? And Gus Dur knows it. But at the same time, the New Order government needs Nadatul Ulama, because the narrative of the New Order government is maintaining Indonesia's pluralism through, sadly, through authoritarian means. So Gus Dur sees this, his unique position, that he is the opposition to the New Order government, but at the same time, he is also needed by the New Order government and the Indonesian armed forces. And this Gus Dur played his card very, very smartly, I think, especially in the last 5 years before Suharto fell down. So with this modality, Gus Dur has been, through his diplomacy tactics, I would say, because in the short period of time, essentially, for those of you who are studying foreign policy and so on, we cannot really say that Gus Dur has had foreign policy, because foreign policy includes strategy, long-term strategy, and so on. But because the nature of his presidency is the interim government with specific condition, that he would need to be very tactically deals with domestic and international challenges. But Gus Dur, in my opinion, as I said in this article, if you could read it later, I think the contribution is that he's showing that even then, Indonesia cannot escape from the international factors, and at the same time, our domestic situation can also be used to extend Indonesia's interest. Because when Gus Dur he attended the OIC summit at that time, and he was arranging that the OIC leaders would make a statement that they all would support Indonesia's national integrity. Because at that time, there was a concern that the GAM, the Free Aceh movement, would use the Islamic countries to support, because that was critical moment. They had their time to really separate from Indonesia, but Gus Dur managed to get that kind of a statement. And also in terms of Papua, Gus Dur launched the idea of a West Pacific organization. Now people think that was not applicable ideas, but back then, Gus Dur get support in terms of Papua. So, but that was tactical, not really foreign policy. Lastly, if I may say, one thing that I did not put in the article is that how his presidency ended. Right? As we know, he was being brought down by the same Islamic party who elevated him to the Islamic party. Now, in the context of democratization, I think Samuel Huntington, the political scientist, once theorized that a democratic transition is consolidated if they manage to have two elections, full cycle of two elections. But at the time, Gus Dur, our democracy was interrupted because there was this kind of internal coup, if I may use the word, right? So it was interrupted as a result. And that's not good. That's why I think our country presidential system, we rejected the idea of bringing down. It has to be fixed term, 5 years. You like it or not, wait until the next election to gain power, right? But that was interrupted in the Indonesian context. And that, I think, contribute as well to the difficult path that we are now walking since 2004. Because the wound of that interruption, I think, has yet to be healed. In terms of Nadatul Ulama, there were internal kind of a wounds between Gus Dur family and others. It continues until today. And then there's distrust against the Islamic parties, and there are misunderstanding. Now every president would want to have big coalition, making sure that he or she will not be challenged. They are so afraid that they will be digusdurkan, right? So they want all presidents since 2004, they want to absorb power as much as possible, because that experience of Gus Dur created bad memory for any president who was elected afterwards. So this, I think, the contribution of Gus Dur, like any other president in Indonesia, and we are lucky, I'll stop here, that in the critical time of political division, Sukarno in 1965, he still could mobilize his supporter to fight against the movement, right? But he decided not to, because that would be bloody. In 1998, Suharto, I think the same. He would still be able to instruct the Indonesian military to crush the movement, the student movement and so on, because the military was still behind Suharto at the time. But he decided not to, right? He resigned from power. Gus Dur, the same thing. In the end, he said, okay, not being a president, it's fine. So he stepped down. But the wound at the society level continue. And this, I think, the big lessons for Indonesian and for students coming from developing countries, Africa, Middle East, and so on, that coup is not good. Secondly, power has to be fixed and maintained, and we could only gain power through electoral means and democratic means. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. This is very interesting elaboration and placing one of our focus in this book, which is Abdurrahman Wahid, that or popularly called as Gus Dur, in running his power during the transitional period of Indonesian leadership at the time.
Even though gender issues become one of neglected areas for these three Muslim thinkers, as I said before, that they are not the opponent of gender equality. In fact, they are the supporters of gender equality.